If the pandemic experience has done nothing else, staying home so much of the time has given many of us a handy excuse to catch up on old movies and TV series. We're seeing things on whatever streaming service we might have that we might not have otherwise bothered to watch. For instance, before, I never realized just how awesome British police shows are. Most of the time, the British cops don't even carry guns. They go to arrest some crook, and it's, "I say, old chap, frightfully sorry, but I'm afraid you're coming with me." And the bad guy just shrugs, "All right then." But good movies are really our thing. And Ellen and I try to set aside at least one night every week to watch something new or an old favorite that we haven't seen in a long time. So if you have any suggestions for us, we would love to hear them. That's exactly how we recently came to watch the movie Seabiscuit, based on the excellent book by Laura Hillenbrand. It's about the racehorse who became famous during the Great Depression and the three people whose lives came together because of that horse. The man who would eventually become Seabiscuit's owner, Charles Howard, he was a wealthy businessman in San Francisco whose young son Frankie had been killed in an accident. Charles Howard's grief over the loss of his son almost destroyed him, and it did destroy his marriage. The second person was Tom Smith. Tom was a quiet horse trainer who became one of the millions of people unemployed and drifting and left without a purpose during the Great Depression. Tom discovered Seabiscuit and convinced Charles Howard to buy that horse. The third person was Red Pollard, who'd been abandoned by his parents and had a hard scrabble life as a boxer, a racehorse jockey, and a stable hand. He was blind in one eye, too tall to be taken seriously as a jockey, and he always seemed to be injured, both physically and emotionally. And then there was Seabiscuit himself. He came from an outstanding lineage, but he'd been sold off from one owner to another. He was deemed far too small and entirely too unstable and temperamental for anyone to waste their time trying to make a decent racehorse out of him. But with their stories intersecting, Seabiscuit and those three humans found a new purpose in life, and it resonated with the American public, which was struggling to find new meaning and purpose and hope in the midst of enormous loss and hardship. It's a true story about second chances. We seem to be hardwired to love stories like that. The person who's been broken, beaten up, and forgotten, written off. Or the character who's messed up their life, who nobody is willing to trust again. Some stories are about redemption, and some are about circumstances beyond your control that keep you from fulfilling the promise you believe about what life could and should be. So it's no surprise. The Bible is chock full of those kinds of stories. The prodigal son is one of those second chance tales of redemption. Most of the biblical heroes and sheroes are deeply flawed people who nonetheless come back from a wilderness of isolation and despair. Ruth and Naomi, they had a good life, but they're victims of a cruel fate. But their love for each other sees them through. And Abraham and Sarah, they're dreamers, believing in a promise that just keeps slipping through their fingers over the course of so many long decades. Stories like those resonate with us because we have all lived them. Collectively, we may be living a story like that right now in the midst of a pandemic that's been dragging on and on and on, and in the midst of so many people who are sick or grieving or lonely or afraid or out of work and struggling to make ends meet, or who are just sick and tired of waiting for a better day to arrive. We're all waiting for that second chance. Those of us with the resources to cope, who have the luxury of being with people we love and the good fortune of continuing to work and even being able to watch old movies at night, we who are privileged like that, we're still often at a loss. We all wonder, when will this end? When will my loved ones and friends be all right? What will life look like on the other side of all this? I mentioned Bible stories about this kind of thing. One reason the Bible has endured through the years is that if we read it carefully, it does not sugarcoat life. No story I can think of is tied up neatly with a bow where God comes to the rescue to make everything perfect again. I don't mean to burst anyone's bubble, but there really are no happily ever after Cinderella stories in the Bible. Not even the Easter story. After the resurrection happened, the followers of Jesus had even more hard work to do than they'd ever bargained for. But I'll be talking more about that in several weeks on Easter Sunday. Happily ever after is rarely how real life works. Now, that doesn't mean we're doomed to a hopeless and sad existence. Of course we're not. It just means in the process of any experience, people change, and circumstances are always in flux. So we learn, we adapt, we grow more resilient. And hopefully, we learn that true happiness is not dependent on the external things that happen to us, but the state of our heart and mind no matter what happens to us. And new things are constantly happening. In the Bible, when God does appear to intercede in human affairs, the outcome is always that the person who's gone through a rough patch is now faced with a whole new set of circumstances to navigate. New challenges have replaced the old ones. It's as though God understands that achieving blissful perfection is not what our lives are about. That's not a goal because the world we live in is far from perfect. Being given a second chance means just that. It's a chance, an opportunity to keep going, to keep pursuing, to keep dreaming, to know it's never too late. There's always more to unpack in this gift of life, always more. The trick is in how we live through that, knowing full well we're still going to make mistakes. We'll continue to grow and change, and the world will keep throwing us curveballs and rewriting the rule book just when we think we have everything figured out. If you have the idea that a life of faith is about never having any questions or uncertainty or problems to contend with, that's just not how it works. Not having any questions or uncertainty or problems is called being dead. Abraham and Sarah's story might be the ultimate example of this. After years of not being able to have children, God makes them a huge promise. Now, in our time, having children is considered to be an option. We have kids because we want the full-blown experience of being parents and having a family. And personally, I have loved being a dad now for a long time. I would never trade that experience for anything. But it's not for everybody, and that's okay too. You can have a perfectly fulfilling life without ever needing to change a diaper or pay for braces. But having kids in the place and time of Sarah and Abraham, that was something else entirely. It was not a choice you made, but an expectation and a necessity. Having children meant that your life had meaning and purpose. It meant that you could prosper. The more offspring you had, the better off you could be. It meant that you had someone to care for you when you got old. Most importantly, it meant that your life extended beyond your own lifetime, so your life actually meant something. Not having children, that was like a slow death sentence. And that's exactly what Sarah and Abraham were living through. They were hopeless, broken, forgotten, out of chances. Until God announces they'll have a second chance. A huge second chance, in fact, because Their extended family will be the largest anyone had ever seen. And the very fact that I'm talking about Sarah and Abraham today is proof of that. Because all of us, in one way or another, spiritually at least, are the descendants of that old couple living in tents out in the desert thousands of years ago. But their story does not conclude with, and they lived happily ever after. That big bold promise in their story kept going through twists and turns and ups and downs and all of the usual stuff that real life presents us with every day. Abraham and Sarah continued to doubt and to wonder and to be impatient and to be let down and to be challenged. But they did that right alongside continuing to have hopes and dreams about what the future held in store. They believed in second chances and that it's never too late. And in that way, they knew great happiness. They learned that God operates in human life not by magically swooping down and fixing everything for us. No, God fills us with a vision of what's possible, of what's wonderful and hopeful, right in the middle of our daily reality, and promises to walk with us as we work our way through it. God knows being human means that we will sometimes feel abandoned and lost, that we will mess up royally, that we'll get kicked down by circumstances, that we'll grow weary and anxious and afraid. I've always found it fascinating to read the story of creation and hear that we are created in God's image. So what does that mean anyway? That we look like God? That God has two legs and a nose like we do? Clearly, it goes a lot deeper than that. If we're creatures made in the likeness of God, that tells me that God knows what we're going through because God is like us. I'm not diminishing God here. I'm simply saying that God knows the score. God's not up in some cloud observing us, but is right here in the muck of daily living with you and me. God weeps when we're grieving. God rejoices when we celebrate. God gets it when we're frustrated and angry and at our wits' end. And the capacity you and I have to forgive and to share, to be compassionate, to give ourselves away for the sake of someone else, to be patient and kind, and to love without limits, that is nothing less than the likeness of God. And God knows we need to believe in second chances, that it's never too late, that hope is stronger than fear, and that love is more powerful than hate, and that no matter what we're going through, we get through it by walking alongside each other and believing in each other and loving each other. Jesus said it very well. Whatever you do for the least of these, you're also doing for me. There's no greater happiness than that way of living. The movie Seabiscuit concludes with a horse race. No big surprise there. It's the final race in Seabiscuit's career, who's coming back from an injury that would have killed most horses. Watching from the stands are Charles Howard and Tom Smith, the grieving and wounded owner and the trainer who'd been treated as a worthless, disposable person. And riding Seabiscuit is Red Pollard, himself badly injured, blind in one eye, and bearing the scars of a lifetime of sorrow and being knocked down. As Seabiscuit slowly pulls ahead of the pack and the finish line comes into view, we hear Red Pollard's voice narrating the story. He explains that people might believe that story is about three men who fixed a broken down horse, but the truth is, their journey with Seabiscuit fixed all of them. And in that way, they also fixed each other. It's beautiful. But the significant thing is we never see Red Pollard and Seabiscuit cross the finish line in the movie. Instead, the camera shifts to show the racetrack ahead, time and life stretching before us, as if to say, there's always more to come. Keep on running the race. Never give up because there are always second chances. Be happy because it's never too late.